The second I walked into that beige HR box of a conference room, I smelled blood. Corporate blood. The kind that stains reputation, not carpet. Cheryl from HR sat there with her smug little Staples folder, and a smile like she'd just caught me sneaking state secrets. I'd seen that expression before, on possums pretending to be lions. And that key fob, she started, holding it up between two acrylic nails like it was radioactive. Don't think we'd overlook your little gadget. I swear I felt a vein throb in my temple. It wasn't the words that got me. It was the tone, patronizing, like a kindergarten teacher catching a kid with candy before lunch. Except this candy was the single point of access to our entire encryption trust chain. She didn't know it, of course. None of them did. Not Cheryl. Not Brian from compliance with his clip-on tie and his Excel fetish. Not even whatever freshly MBA'd clown greenlit this internal security sweep. To them, it was just a blinky plastic fob attached to my badge lanyard. A toy. A trinket. Something to laugh about while sipping whatever gutless coffee HR brewed downstairs. I didn't flinch. Didn't blink. I just looked at Cheryl like I was watching someone walk backward into traffic, and had made peace with their decision. That's not a gadget, I said deadpan. That's the backbone of your entire digital infrastructure. Her smile twitched, just slightly, like a dog hearing the first rumble of a thunderstorm. She said, scribbling on her little HR violation report like she was on an episode of Dateline. IT's been informed. We'll be disabling access today and recovering the device. Disabling access. Recovering the device. Lady, you're about to recover an extinction event. Before I go any further, if you're listening to this and your jaw's already halfway to the floor, do me a favor. Tap that subscribe button and like the video. 97% of you watch these stories without subscribing, and it's the one thing that actually motivates the team to keep digging deep and bringing you more real corporate chaos. Alright, back to the implosion. So I sat there, watching the key fob in her hand like it was a grenade she had just pulled the pin out of with her own teeth. I could have stopped her. Could have launched into a breakdown of asymmetric encryption layers, root cert chains, and why this particular fob wasn't just plugged into my day-to-day workflow. It was the workflow. But she didn't want answers. She wanted compliance. She wanted to be the one who found the breach. And when people like Cheryl feel powerful, they don't pause for clarification. They charge in like toddlers with scissors. Do you understand the consequences of unauthorized hardware in secure environments? She asked, as if she hadn't just gutted her own castle wall and thrown the drawbridge into a bonfire. I signed whatever paper she slid across the desk. She thought that meant surrender. What it actually meant was, I wanted a front row seat for what was coming next. I left my badge. I left the fob. I left the building. And by 9:02 a.m., the alarm started howling. The building's silence shattered at exactly 9:02 a.m. Not a fire alarm. Not some quarterly drill. No, this was the scream of infrastructure bleeding out. A low, urgent blare that started in the security wing and rolled like a tsunami toward operations. Lights flickered. Screens went black. The little green LED on every badge reader across the floor? Dead. And for a company that prided itself on zero-trust architecture, that sudden nothingness meant one thing: panic. I wasn't even in the building when it started. I was in the parking lot, sitting in my car, sipping the bitterest gas station coffee I could find, because irony tastes better with a kick. I watched through my rearview mirror as glass doors refused to open, badge readers blinked stupidly, and a line of junior analysts stood frozen, holding up lanyards like morons trying to get into a concert that had been canceled mid-song. A few of them recognized me. I saw one mouth something to her colleague. Didn't they just fire her? Yeah, they did. They just also fired their digital heartbeat. The key fob they took? That wasn't just a toy. That was the root token for our hardware security module, the HSM. You know, the thing that validates every encrypted handshake, every digital certificate, every vault access, every client authentication request from New York to goddamn Singapore? Yeah. That fob was the ceremonial sword in the stone, and only I could wield it. And Cheryl? Cheryl ripped it out like it was a USB drive full of vacation photos. That sound, the sirens, the alerts, the rising swarm of confused footsteps. It wasn't just noise. It was the beginning of digital excommunication. The moment the castle realized the key had been thrown into the moat. I sat there, not touching a thing. I didn't call anyone. Didn't answer the frantic texts that had already started flooding in from the dev team. Are you online? SSL is failing on prod? What's going on with the trust layer? I just leaned back and smiled. The same smile Cheryl gave me not even an hour ago. Hers was fake. Mine. Mine came with a body count. Inside, they were probably rebooting systems like it was 1999. Thinking a restart would magically regenerate root trust. But trust doesn't reboot. Trust doesn't respawn. Not when you've just killed the one object that everything else authenticated against. See, unlike the leadership team, I actually read the dependencies. I built them. By 9:07, I saw the first exec bolt across the mezzanine. Phone pressed to his ear, shouting into dead air. The digital backbone had collapsed in real time. And the people who thought they ran the place were just now realizing it was never their house to begin with. They didn't just pull the plug on me. They pulled the plug on reality, and still thought they could lecture me on protocol. I didn't have to lift a finger. That's the part that made it beautiful. By 9:10, the only thing I was touching was the steering wheel. And I wasn't going anywhere. Not yet. I wanted to hear the next wave hit. I wanted to watch the first domino fall with my own eyes. By 9:18 a.m. The Slack threads started leaking like a busted radiator in a '94 Chevy. At first it was just a trickle, one message in the DevOps channel. Anyone else getting cert validation errors from Vault? Then another. CRM won't authenticate. Says root trust expired? And another. Client login portals are throwing untrusted cert errors. Dev tools won't connect. Is this planned? Planned. That was rich. I could have laughed. Hell, I did laugh. Sitting there in my car, watching The Office like it was a sitcom with the laugh track stripped out and replaced with panicked middle managers clutching tablets that couldn't load dashboards. One of them, Ken from Data Governance, who used to correct me in meetings like he was paid per condescension, stood in the lobby tapping his badge against the reader over and over. His face looked like a toddler realizing the vending machine ate his last quarter. You don't fix trust with persistence, Ken. But you keep trying, buddy. Meanwhile, leadership tried to hold the dam with duct tape and denial. The VP of engineering, I think her name was Lisa, though I always called her spreadsheet Barbie in my head, posted this little gem in the all-staff channel. Hi team, we're experiencing a minor certificate disruption. Please stand by. IT is actively investigating. No action needed at this time. Minor. Like saying Chernobyl had a minor venting issue. Like saying your parachute, temporarily, forgot how gravity works. See, when your entire infrastructure runs on a trust hierarchy, when all your certs ladder back to a master seal embedded in a hardware token, and you disable that token because Cheryl from HR got bored with her clipboard, that's not a hiccup. That's a goddamn organ failure. Every system was looking for its God now. And God had been terminated at 8:51 a.m. in a beige room with a budget coffee maker and a potted fern named Carl. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years I sat in meetings where people talked over me, told me to make it less technical, or asked why we still needed HSMs when AWS offered some discount workaround. And now here they were, facing the very ghost I warned them about. An invisible root failure spreading through every digital artery. And the only person who understood the infection had just been escorted off the premises like a mall shoplifter. My phone buzzed again. Client onboarding suite is down. Are we rotating certs today? No one has access. Legal says we're contractually required to maintain up-to-date trust paths. This is a violation if we don't fix it now. Now. Sweetheart. Now died the second Cheryl confiscated that fob and tossed it in her desk drawer next to her Bath & Body Works coupons and half a tuna wrap. You can't unswing a wrecking ball. By 9:31 a.m., the internal ticket queue hit 213 unresolved issues. Most of them had the same tag, trust chain failure. That's when I knew it had breached containment. What started in one wing had metastasized. Secure vaults, client auth, internal tools, payment integrations. They were all screaming the same thing. We don't believe you anymore. I leaned my head back against the headrest, closed my eyes and smiled. The same smirk Cheryl gave me when she thought she was clever. Only mine came with fire. By 9:46 a.m. The whisper network had evolved from confused muttering to something closer to superstition. They spoke my name like it might summon lightning or salvation. Half the floor was paralyzed in place, pretending to work while low-level chaos rolled through every department like a fog no one wanted to acknowledge publicly. And then the whispers started cutting through the silence, slicing through cubicles and corners and glass partitions like razor wire. Wait, wasn't she the one managing the trust keys? I heard it from the stairwell landing while pretending to check my phone. Two project managers from finance, Donna and Raj, hunched over a laptop like it held the Rosetta Stone. They weren't even trying to keep it quiet. They were trying to make sense of the unraveling, trying to remember what they'd conveniently ignored for the last 5 years. I thought she just maintained backups or something. No, she was the chain. Like the hardware layer. The source. The source of what? Of everything, Raj. That one hit me harder than I thought it would. Everything. I used to say that during onboarding, half joking, half daring them to listen. This little black fob? It's the source of truth. Lose this, and the whole system forgets who it is. They'd nod and move on. I was background noise. The system girl. The certificate gremlin. The one who talks to machines. Now I was the name they were afraid to speak too loudly. Like they thought if they said it 3 times in front of a locked dashboard, it might unlock itself. Further down the hall, in a scrum room near the dev pit, I passed a huddle of engineers. One of them, the same guy who once sent me a meme about gatekeeping dev tools, after I denied him root access, looked up as I passed. Not with disdain this time, but with caution. He nudged his friend. The whisper came again. She built the vault provisioning flow, right? Dude. Not just that. She was the HSM admin level 0 root. Silence. The same kind of silence you hear right before a storm peels the roof off a house. I walked slower through that hallway than I needed to. Not to show off. Not to bask in it. But to feel it. The shift. The recognition. Vindication doesn't always come loud. Sometimes it's a series of soft glances and lowered voices. A tide turning not with a crash but with a slow, undeniable pull. And make no mistake, it was pulling. Fast. By 10:03 a.m., the support team was manually replying to clients with carefully worded apologies. We're experiencing a brief trust sync issue. Services will resume shortly. But the whispers behind closed doors were less polished. We're blind, one exec snapped in a meeting I passed by. We've got no valid root. No authentication chain. No cert authority. Everything's rejecting. A pause. Who the hell designed this dependency? Another voice. She did. Not some former engineer. Not that girl from SEC Ops. Just she did. By 10:09, I saw Cheryl. She was walking fast, lips thin, face flushed. Her confidence was gone. No clipboard. No folder. Just a phone glued to her ear. And that desperate look of someone trying to rewind reality with bad signal. She didn't see me. But I saw her. And I saw something else in her face too. Not guilt. Not fear. Recognition. She finally realized that key fob hadn't just unlocked access. It had held it. And she'd stripped it away like she was yanking a USB charger from a printer. Except now the printer was on fire. And no one remembered how it got lit. And me? I was the match they tossed without reading the label. By 10:31 a.m., the call center floor sounded like an air raid shelter. Ringing phones, raised voices, people clutching headsets like lifelines. You'd think we'd been breached by a foreign state the way everyone was moving. But no, this wasn't outside sabotage. This was self-inflicted. This was Cheryl's crusade against unauthorized hardware, detonating in slow motion, one certificate rejection at a time. The first VIP client to call in was a mid-sized bank we'd onboard last fiscal year. They were locked out of their document signing suite, screaming that our validation chain was throwing revocation errors. No signature meant no money moved. No money moved meant compliance violations. And compliance violations in fintech? That's where lawsuits start to form like thunderheads. I've got 6 institutions screaming at us. The client success manager barked into the ops line. They think we've been compromised. Do you understand what it means when we can't authenticate them? Yeah. I understood it better than anyone. At 10:42 a.m., legal joined the emergency bridge call and didn't even try to sugarcoat it. Their voice, cool, clinical, cut through the chatter like a scalpel. Our contractual language with 38 clients explicitly states that we will maintain continuous, validated trust infrastructure. If we can't re-establish that within SLA windows, we're facing breach of contract scenarios. Potential damages are significant. Significant. Millions were leaking out of the company in real time. And all because someone mistook mission-critical cryptographic hardware for a flash drive from Best Buy. I sat near the cafeteria, far from the storm center, but close enough to watch the vibrations ripple through the glass walls. No one asked me to rejoin. No one had even made eye contact. But I saw them. CTO pacing like a caged animal. Two engineers from DevSEC arguing over whether they could rebuild trust using a backup cert set. Except I knew those backups expired months ago. I'd warned them. In an email titled, quite literally, "These backups will not save you." They never responded to that email. It was around 10:58 a.m. when marketing's tools went dark. No dashboards. No email campaigns. Their outbound was bricked because it couldn't handshake with our API gateway. We'd built it to require strict TLS validation. That was the point. Security first. No exceptions. So when the root cert died with my fob, it took half the SaaS stack with it. I watched it unfold like a slow implosion. Every team that had ever asked, "Do we really need all this encryption?" was now sprinting around like their shoes were on fire, trying to manually whitelist clients who no longer trusted us. Trying to fix what they never understood to begin with. And me? I didn't say a word. I sat with a plastic cup of lukewarm tea, listening to the chaos as it rippled outward. I'd already done the hard part, nothing. No sabotage. No code tampering. I didn't need to. All I had to do was let their arrogance run its course. Turns out, when you build your entire infrastructure on a single point of truth, you'd better know who holds the key. And Cheryl? Cheryl was the kind of person who thought the key looked suspicious. By 11:14 a.m., the CTO's bravado had cracked like a dropped ceramic mug. He'd been strutting through incident meetings all morning, barking orders, pretending to triage, roll back the certs, reboot the vault layer, restore from backup. Like the volume of his voice could overwrite the laws of cryptography. But now he was slumped in the hallway outside the server control room, his blazer off, hair clinging to his forehead. A single phrase leaking out like a confession he hoped no one would hear. She was the only one with the master authority. I heard it clear as day. He didn't know I was behind the pillar outside Conference B, sipping from my tea again, watching senior engineers march back and forth like confused fire marshals. A security analyst had just attempted to redeploy the main trust store using a secondary token stored in what they called the redundancy cabinet. I nearly choked on my drink. That redundancy token? It was just a dummy placeholder. Something I'd documented as non-functional 18 months ago, because it lacked one crucial thing. The root-of-root private signature that only lived inside my fob. That fob, the one Cheryl had stuffed into a padded envelope and probably left on her desk under a pile of onboarding forms, hadn't just held a key. It had held the key, the only one with the full authority to re-sign the root cert and propagate trust back through our entire chain. Every time the CTO had called me paranoid, in planning meetings for insisting we not delegate root access, he was actually cementing his own dependence on me. He just didn't realize the final handshake was one way. I thought she documented the rotation procedure, one engineer said, exasperated. She did, someone else replied. It's on the internal wiki. Then why the hell can't we follow it? A pause. Because the wiki says you need her. I didn't write that line with arrogance. I wrote it with accuracy. I watched the CTO rake a hand through his hair, phone trembling in his grip as he stepped into the corner near the CEO's glass office. They were already mid-conversation. I saw the CEO lean forward, lips pursed, trying not to explode. He had the look of a man who knew the ship was taking on water, but was still pretending the ocean was a feature. I couldn't hear the CTO's side. But I didn't need to. His body language did all the talking. At one point he lifted both hands and said, barely audible but razor clear, she was the only one with the master authority. That moment, that precise sentence, rippled through the walls like a detonator. A man who'd once called me overly attached to legacy systems now had to say out loud, to the highest-ranking executive in the building, that the legacy was never the problem. I had been the system all along. And I hadn't touched a line of code since 8:51 that morning. It wasn't pride I felt. It wasn't even justice. It was balance, like the universe finally tipped the scale back after years of eye rolls, and, just make it work, slaps from people who never read past the dashboard metrics. The same people who told me my obsession with secure provisioning slowed us down were now watching their entire operational integrity dissolve in real time. Power shifted in that moment. Not with a bang, not with a mutiny, just with the quiet admission of truth. A truth they all felt now, down to their bones, because it wasn't theoretical anymore. It was loss, consequence, real-world collapse. And I didn't have to demand respect. They were handing it to me, one failure at a time. By 11:39 a.m., the executive floor no longer looked like a command center. It looked like a hospital waiting room after a bombing. No one was making eye contact. No one was raising their voice anymore. The shouting had burned off hours ago, and what was left was quieter, meaner. The kind of silence that settles over a room when everyone realizes they trusted the wrong people. And now the bill was coming due. I took the side stairs up. I wasn't supposed to be there. My badge didn't work, but the second floor intern door never latched properly, and I'd designed half the security protocols anyway. No one noticed me. They were too busy unraveling. The CEO stood in front of HR's glass office like a loaded gun. I'd seen him give polished keynote speeches with that same sharp jaw and tailored charisma, but now, he looked like someone had just told him the company had 5 minutes to live, and the detonator was inside the building. His hands were clenched. His voice was low, and that made it worse, like he'd gone past rage into something colder. Why? He said, pausing between syllables like each one was a bullet. Wasn't this cleared with IT? Cheryl froze. She had her usual clipboard, because of course she did, but her pen wasn't moving. She looked smaller now, like someone had unplugged the life from her posture. That perfectly rehearsed HR tone? Gone. She sounded like a kid caught shoplifting, trying to convince the principal it was all a misunderstanding. We were conducting a compliance sweep, she said, voice brittle. There were several unauthorized devices. We logged a report about the fob. We thought it was unnecessary hardware. The CEO didn't blink. Unnecessary hardware. He said it again, slower this time. Deadlier. You could hear her swallow. It was a security risk, Cheryl added quickly, like the words might save her if she stacked them fast enough. We didn't want to take chances with unknown equipment. You mean the root fob, he snapped. The one tied to every trust path, certificate, and secure vault handshake? Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Just that wide-eyed panic of someone realizing too late that they were holding the torch in a house soaked in gasoline. Do you even know what that fob did? He asked, leaning in now. Did you read a single page of its config documentation before you stuffed it into an envelope like a thumb drive from a cereal box? Cheryl shook her head, just barely. IT never flagged it as critical. Because IT knew it was critical, he growled. They didn't flag it because it was beyond flagging. It was embedded. It was essential. That word again, essential. The same word they didn't use when they let me walk out the door like a technician from another floor, like someone they could replace with a guy who knew how to use Google Sheets. I stood at the end of the hallway, half hidden behind the frosted glass, watching Cheryl's shoulders collapse inward like a folding chair. She wasn't smug anymore. Wasn't waving HR policies like a badge of honor. She was shrinking. Apologizing. But the thing about irreversible mistakes? Sorry doesn't reissue a revoked trust chain. From down the hall, I saw the CTO step out of a meeting room and catch my eye. He didn't say anything. Just nodded once. Slow, quiet, like a man who'd just watched his entire architecture catch fire, and finally spotted the person holding the extinguisher. They were unraveling, and I hadn't even stepped into the room. I didn't need to. They were finally realizing who the non-essential really was. By 12:07 p.m., the tone in the building had shifted from crisis management to something more existential. Nobody was shouting anymore. No more pings from Slack. The alert system stopped chiming, not because the issues were resolved, but because the monitoring tools had given up. You don't warn about a fire when the entire building's already ash. People moved slower now, heads down, shoulders hunched, like the realization had finally landed. This wasn't a glitch. This was collapse. I'd found a quiet corner outside the war room, one of those little alcoves with a sad ficus and an outdated poster about team synergy. From here, I could see the reflection of the conference room through the glass, just enough to watch the suits without being seen. They were all in there: CTO, CEO, legal, compliance, even the finance guy who once told me, security is just overhead with a badge. Nobody looked like they were breathing normally. And then it came. Low. Quiet. Almost not meant to be heard. The CTO leaned forward and whispered to the CEO. Voice strained, like the words physically hurt coming out. That wasn't just a gadget, he said. That was our foundation of trust. I didn't need to hear anything else. In that one sentence, years of dismissal, side eyes, and underhanded comments vaporized. The people who once asked why I was so attached to a blinking fob were now watching their reputation bleed out through their own hands. I built that trust chain from scratch, line by line, cert by cert. I nested every dependency, triple-signed every failover, and documented it all so even a half-competent engineer could maintain it if they bothered to read past the login page. But no one did, because I was always there. Until they got rid of me. Now the contracts were hanging by threads. Our SOC 2 compliance? Dead in the water. Every vendor handshake that used our trust layer was in limbo. Some clients already revoked partnerships until we could demonstrate revalidation. But that wasn't happening without the fob. And no one knew where the fob was anymore, because HR didn't log it properly after confiscation. Cheryl probably dropped it in a filing cabinet labeled miscellaneous tech. One object. One oversight. One empire on its knees. I didn't smirk. I didn't gloat. Not this time. Because this wasn't vindication anymore. This was consequence. You spend years trying to teach people how fragile trust is. How it's not just an idea, but a series of invisible threads holding everything together. And then they laugh. They mock. They label you paranoid. Until the threads snap and the silence gets loud. I leaned back against the wall, letting the quiet settle in. No emails. No pings. No one calling my name. But they were all thinking it. Every person in that room now understood what they'd lost. Not just a system, not just a role. They'd lost the person who understood the gravity of what they were playing with. And gravity always wins. By 12:41 p.m. The boardroom lights were dimmed, the projector humming low, and every chair around that polished walnut table was filled with a face more panicked than the last. I didn't need to see their eyes to know. These were the expressions of people watching the scaffolding of empire snap under its own weight. One after another, the board members had been summoned in from calls, meetings, even a golf tournament I heard was cut short due to internal crisis. They had no idea just how internal it was. I stood by the east corridor window as the emergency meeting began. Through the frosted glass, I could make out their outlines. CTO at the front, sleeves rolled up like a battlefield medic, sweat bleeding through his dress shirt. Legal to his right, arms crossed, jaw locked. The CEO sat motionless, face unreadable. But it was the silence that told me everything. Nobody was yelling anymore. Yelling was for problems that had solutions. This was diagnosis. This was reckoning. CTO took a breath and pulled up the slide that would unravel what little dignity they had left. Every certificate, he said, loud enough for his voice to carry through the glass. Every encryption key, every secure handshake we've ever signed, they all trace back to a single object. The hardware seal we killed at her desk. He didn't flinch on the pronoun. Not a device. Not a process error. Not a gap in documentation. Her desk. It was personal now. He knew. They all knew. There was no backup key. No ruto verbrite. No graceful recovery script. They'd ripped out the master seal in a rush to flex policy over practicality. And in doing so, they'd stripped the company of its memory, its legitimacy, and its future in a single morning. And now, they were discovering the cost. Revenue projections were collapsing. Clients were demanding third-party audits. Internal tools were still frozen. External platforms were filing breach notifications just to cover liability. And worst of all, trust, the real kind, the kind no budget can buy, had vanished like smoke through a broken window. Inside, no one spoke for a long time after the CTO finished. They just sat there, the board of directors of a once indomitable tech firm, staring at the ghost of their own arrogance projected onto the wall. That's when I walked by. Not quickly, not slowly, just deliberately. I didn't try to be seen, but I didn't hide either. A few heads turned as I passed. No one called out. No one tried to stop me. What could they even say? They'd already said enough. I reached the elevator and pressed the button. Behind me, the boardroom sat in complete silence. The kind that doesn't break, it settles. Heavy. Permanent. As the doors slid closed, I looked at my reflection one last time. Funny thing about trust, you don't notice it until the alarms start.